Hello everyone, this is Zoltar, and welcome to Offworld Trading Company Multiplayer. This game is going to be a bit different from the first one I did, because this commentary is being done after the video was actually recorded. This is not live commentary in any way, shape, or form. If that disappoints you, I'm very sorry, but I thought this would be a nice way to do these games, because what was going on here was I was able to identify some of the better players in the game and thankfully get into some games with them. They were being streamed at the time. I didn't want to be trying to commentate while I'm trying to, make sure that the stream is moving forward and I'm not being disruptive and make sure I actually get into the game. So I didn't want to bother setting all that up. I just basically turned on my recording software and hit the record button. So that's why we're not commentating these live. And frankly, I think this will be a nicer learning environment for kind of discussing what's going on in the game, rather than me trying to figure out what I'm doing and talk about what I'm doing at the same time. So, let's play catch-up. I'm already level 2 expansive. This shouldn't be any surprise whatsoever. What happened in the founding phase was I found a decent spot of aluminum. I was like, okay, I'll just take some of this. There's iron not too far away. There's a decent iron tile, an acceptable iron tile, with a couple iron tiles next to it if I really need more iron. So I just threw down on it, let the resources fly in, bought up some steel, and just immediately hit that level 2 button so I could try and get some solid steel production up and running, and that's where we're at right now. I've also claimed a high-yield water tile because I've identified that while there's ice on the map, water tiles themselves are fairly sparse, and I thought that that would be a valuable tile to claim because I believe it's the closest high-yield water tile to me. I kind of want this auction, is what's going on in my head. I like it, but everybody else needs it a bit worse, and so maybe I'll just let them fight over it. There's so many of them this game that they've driven the price up quite high. So while he pulled off that auction, it wasn't the steel that it might have been in a game with a lesser number of players. Let's go ahead. I've got most of my claims down. I'm making one more. I believe this one's going to be a solar plant. I kind of like solar power still. I'm not in the same boat with a lot of the community that I've seen where they're like wind power all the way. No, I'm okay with solar most of the time. Solar's fine. Especially in this game because silicon is significantly cheaper than carbon. It's easier to get up that solar power initially in the early phase of the game where power is frequently the most damaging thing that you can be losing out on. I do go ahead and grab a goon squad to go along with that solar panel, and there it goes down. Now, as for what everybody else is doing, PB Head and Apollo are both extremely strong players. Unfortunately, Apollo was kicked out of the game and was replaced by an AI, but the AI is a fairly strong player as well, so hopefully that won't be too much of an issue. But PB Head is also a very strong player. He's also level 2 at this point. Everyone else is kind of lagging behind, maybe a little bit later to throw down, maybe spending money like Sharkbait did on extra claims and things of that nature. We can see the extra claims have already gotten very expensive for this phase of the game at 7,000. So that's kind of what everybody else is up to, and they seem to be focusing on still trying to make sure they have that iron that they're collecting iron, make sure they're collecting aluminum, make sure they're collecting water. Everybody's still kind of setting that up at this phase of the game and trying to get established. I still never threw down that water pump. That water pump, actually, I'll be straight with you guys, that water pump doesn't go down forever, and that's a huge mistake. I'm basically -1 tile for a massive portion of this game.
The black market is online.
Thankfully, I do have a decent source of iron, not too much iron, just a little bit, and a good set of steel mills up so that I can convert iron to steel at a 1-to-1 and keep my growth going once iron has come down just a little bit more. That's what I'm focused on at the moment. I'm just trying to get to level 3. This is pretty much how I always will play expansive. I like to ignore the rest of the map and just do my thing. I want to focus on growing as much as I can because you get so much benefit out of growing. You'll see PB Head also doing very well. He's already hit level 3. He's going scavenger this game. So he's in that carbon market. I'm in that steel market. We're not interacting with each other almost at all at this phase of the game. And Sharkbait, Apollo, and K1 are kind of next in line with Anti-Pope and Chairman, and you bringing up the rear for the time being. I kind of want this, but not enough to commit a large amount of debt at this point. Because while it's valuable, there might be something even more valuable for an auction not too far away, and I've seen that life support's already getting quite expensive, and I don't want my debt to be flying too high too early, because I typically make myself a bit of a vulnerable target. No, don't throw down that glass right next to my headquarters. And there's a good reason for that. I want to be able to get at least 3 glass furnaces next to each other later in the game if I can. My aluminum just got underground nuked. It was quite rude, but it's not a huge problem because aluminum is only $10. I want to be able to get down those 3 glass furnaces next to each other later, is my thought process right now. So I don't want to place them right next to the headquarters because I can't do that. I can't get the 100% adjacency bonus. So instead I throw them down a little bit further away. I put down a patent lab, which I love the patent lab. It's a fantastic building early in the game in my opinion. I throw down that patent lab, it connects everything up, and suddenly it's not an issue anymore. And I can get that glass production going right away, because like usual, glass is out of control this game and will only get more so as more people try to upgrade. One thing you might have noticed is that very, very early in the game, I had purchased a large amount of glass with all of my extra money that was floating around. To secure that glass while it was cheap, drive up the price for when my production starts, and slow everybody else down as they're trying to play catch-up instead of already having access to those resources. Somebody tried to dynamite the AI, tried to dynamite probably my patent lab. They usually do that. Here I get quite lucky. There's a glass shortage. I can't abuse the shortage that much in the short term, but it does mean that having moved into glass production already gives me a significant random advantage in this game. It's especially an effective shortage because, frankly, glass was already extremely expensive, and shortages just make things more and more and more expensive the more short you are on them, as it turns out. So that'll give me a large amount of income for a very long time, thankfully. I do make a mistake. I don't believe I get down that 3rd glass furnace for a long time. If I ever do, it would have been very beneficial for me to maybe try and pick up an extra claim at some point and try and get that extra glass production down. But I'm a bit focused on teleportation for the time being. Teleportation is very important in my opinion. It is beyond overpowered, bordering on insane for the things it lets you do in this game. I could have gone harder for this, but my debt's already fairly significant. And I didn't want to make myself too much of a target. I'm not even the most expensive stock price on the map right now. 2 people have stock prices above mine. And so I didn't want to push it too hard by going too deep into debt just for that 1 extra claim, even though I could have gotten a lot of benefit out of it with glass production. Here we're seeing PB Head. I want to take a shot at him at some point. I'm pretty slow in that, but I do eventually get some hits down onto his carbon and try to slow him down a bit. We saw that most of his production was geared very similar to the way mine was. He was simply trying to focus on himself, is what it looked like. We found a pretty good spot to get a lot of adjacency bonuses off carbon. I believe he had some amount of aluminum coming in, and he was just trying to ensure that he would be able to grow, and he did. He got to level 4 before I did, mostly due to that patent lab that I threw down. Finally get that extra claim. There we go, get that 3rd glass furnace down. So he's doing the same thing I am. He's just doing it as a scavenger rather than as an expansive colony. He's going to be the primary threat this game. He often is. He's an extremely strong player. Anti-Pope does a very good job this game as well. We can see he has the engineering bay down, whatever it's called, the thing that lets you enhance your production of a particular resource at a time. I don't like that building very much personally. I never see a lot of really good use of it, because my opinion is that if you're producing that much of a resource and then you just keep going more and more and more, it takes you so long to get the tech, to get serious value out of having that tile taken up by that research, that by the time you get it all done, the market has probably come significantly down on that resource as other people try and cut into the market, and as your own production starts bringing that price down, and suddenly you've been wasting a tile the whole time, and now you have to retool anyway, and you've just lost a bunch of chemicals and a bunch of other things. I'm getting hit really hard by black market right now. Not a huge surprise. I took the opportunity to move away from steel and into food very early, much earlier than I usually do this game. I usually won't hit food until I'm headquarter level 4. But steel had crashed out. People were making all kinds of steel. So I move out of it for the time being and move into food while, once again, glass is still cheaper because people haven't gotten to buying that much of it yet. And I know food will be very difficult for everyone else to move into because of that prohibitive glass price. I kind of want the pirates here. I'm targeting the glass furnaces of K1 because he has managed to move into some glass production. That was my basic thought for these pirates. I don't remember exactly how hard I go for them, but glass is extremely valuable, so even with my ridiculous amount of debt, this will make me a significant amount of money if I get a hold of these pirates. It would appear that I was, in the moment, too scared of the debt and didn't want to commit that hard.
Let this be a lesson to you all. Screw with us.
That's also going to be influenced by the fact that I knew I had just picked up teleportation, or was immediately about to pick up teleportation. And so the pirates at least couldn't be used to hurt me. So let everybody else fight over it, and I'll just be off in my corner doing my little thing. My glass furnaces get hit again. I did move back into steel. This is because, once again, I still want to be able to support myself. I want to ensure my own personal growth, because I have been falling behind in terms of my growth due to this attempted move into the food market. That didn't work out for me at all because all of them got mutinied. All of them. You can see they're just sitting there. I don't control any of them. This feels awful, by the way, when it happens to you in game. Just so everybody knows. It's not the kind of thing you want. So here, I'm trying to get up food production in another area. I'm trying to spread out, make quick use of that teleportation that I picked up, by spreading everything out so I can't be hit by black markets too hard. This is, I think, a part of teleportation people kind of know is good, but they don't necessarily think about all the time. This idea that, okay, well, I can spread all my buildings out a lot more easily, and then I'm not so easily punishable, first of all. And then second, there's the idea that I get all these resources instantly, so I can instantly turn those resources into money if I want to. Now here comes actually a big turning point in this game that really supports my stock price and keeps this debt from hitting me too hard. What's happened is Sharkbait has gone into a death spiral. He's trying to compensate for this by buying up his own stock. Unfortunately, it's far too late for that. His debt is way too high. His stock is going to keep plummeting. I noticed this. I got one buy-in. Anti-Pope also got one buy-in. This will reduce the price of the coming buyout for Sharkbait when he's bought up all of his stock. I was keeping an eye on it the whole time. I immediately clicked the button and took all of his stuff. I think that's actually the single most significant flaw in this game right now. Is the fact that when one person death spirals out, it can turn the game pretty hard. My stock price just jumped up immediately, and suddenly I can ignore all this debt. I don't have to worry about it for a long time because my stock price is so ridiculously high.
Your stock is being bought.
Anti-Pope trying to counter by buying me out. I'm not too worried about him. I will try and defend myself a little bit, but I'll choose to do it by buying out my own stock rather than paying down the debt too much most of the time.
Your stock is being bought.
PB Head also noticing, trying to buy me up. Yu has gotten scared. She has also entered a bit of a death spiral. I think she recovers from this to some degree. More impressively than Sharkbait did at any rate. And everybody at this point is a little bit too busy fighting each other to go after her right away. My food production is still frozen, constantly having black market effects thrown at me. I would potentially have the opportunity to goon squad my own food, but I choose to kind of abuse the fact that I'm expansive instead. I don't want to try and fight through a scavenger, plus others constantly throwing black market effects at me. I can only defend one of the tile at best. I'd rather let them try and mutiny each other, freeze each other out after the mutinies, things of that nature, than focus exclusively on defending myself with goon squads. That water tile still isn't taken, by the way. Just pointing that out now.
We're not surprised.
I obviously try and dynamite the off-world market that I spotted, that I've been watching for the whole time. It doesn't work. That shouldn't be a big surprise, but it does clear out one of the cheaper goon squads for less money. I get dynamited in return at some point, but it's still going to be costing him over time more money than it cost me, especially if I actually get the dynamite hit. At this point, I'm really frustrated. If we pulled up, if that little random event came up that showed us, please kick me, or, please just kick me, whatever the title is for it, that shows black market hits, I'm certain I would be at the absolute top of that board. Which should be no surprise. I've moved into the single most valuable resource. The hilarious part is everybody else keeps knocking it down, so it keeps staying quite valuable. So I'm trying to get to an off-world market here. I use, I believe, the little trick of I'm done with this patent lab. I could get other things from it, but I don't need them. So in order to go ahead and try to get my off-world trading company up on a protected tile, I'll just delete the patent lab. The goon squad sticks around. And I place the off-world trading company on top of it. Now that's actually, I've learned, a pretty terrible spot to put an off-world trading company or any other building you want to protect with a goon squad, and here's why. You can, from what I have seen, underground nuke a building like that. You can do it, but there has to be a resource underneath the tile, from what I've seen. I think you'll see later I try and use underground nukes to try and blast through some goon squads, but it doesn't go quite so well, and I have to redirect them elsewhere, and it's a bit of a mess. But I've been hit by underground nukes onto my goon squads before, so that can be a very cheap way to clear out a goon squad if somebody has misplaced a building like I have here with my off-world market and patent lab. I might have been much better off just simply converting that to an aluminum mine and grabbing another tile somewhere else. I'm really gunning for PB head here. He's made himself extremely valuable, but his debt is entirely out of control, quite clearly. Because even with our 180,000 debt we've got going on right now, our stock price is well above his. He has bought up a fair amount of our stock, so he has made himself the target that we are after. Yu has recovered quite nicely by purchasing up chairman of the board, by the way, and is now a pretty decent spot to try and stabilize.
Dirty rat trying to break our stuff.
Obviously that goon squad paid off. I used the cheap goon squad I bought earlier and reprotect the off-world market. I'm not trying to move into a second off-world market right now, by the way. That's not even on my mind, because I'm far more concerned about the stock war that's going on than I am about my future profits. I want to devote all of my money toward making sure that I can take out PB head and secure all of my own stock for the time being, rather than throwing down resources that might just get bought up because I've let my stock price get too low or I've gone too long without defending it. See, now that second off-world trading company that got thrown down, thrown down on top of aluminum, I could probably underground nuke that. Finally, PB head has failed to replace his goon squad. We're on top of it that time. We knock out his off-world trading company, and that's basically lights out for him. He does not have a good way to recover at this point. There goes that water pump. That water pump from headquarter level 2. Finally it goes down. With glass having risen so high in the early game, I never really had to transfer away from it at this point. Just with my 3 glass furnaces, they've been sitting there pumping away the whole time, and they stay valuable for quite a long time because everybody who isn't robotic needs them. Almost nobody goes robotic, and off-world trading companies require them. It's a very similar reason that steel can stay quite valuable through a significant portion of the game. At this point, water has gotten a bit excessive. I'm trying to throw down water where I can manage it, including getting rid of this iron tile. I also experiment with something in a moment that you'll see that doesn't quite pan out. But water's gotten ridiculous. I don't want to make food anymore. I need to find another market to be in. Thankfully, I have secured the carbon production of one of the scavenger players, and so I can abuse this high carbon price that I don't actually need any of that resource. This is when I'm going to start driving food back up because I realize, oh man, I should actually check out off-world market prices and make really solid use of those. And food's still very expensive. I am going to be considering getting Offworld markets up again, making sure that all PB heads are recovered. At this point, I'm feeling pretty safe. Let's be honest. Who doesn't feel safe when they've got 3 or 4 Offworld markets up, almost all of their stock purchased, nobody anywhere close to them in stock price? It feels like a good part of the game to be in. So I'm trying to just kind of ride this lead to victory at this point. There's nothing too tricky or complicated. I do select Anti-Pope as my first target for a whole bunch of reasons. First of all, he has stock in everybody. If I can take him down, I get all that stock, and it'll make everybody else easier to finish off. Second, he has stock in me. That's actually the most important part. I don't want anybody to have stock in me. I want to be hard to buy.
Offworld shipment
So frequently
launched.
I will target down the
Look at
people
all
who
the
get
money.
my stock. I'll make sure to punish them and say, no, you went after me. That's not allowed. I'll take them out and recover all of my own stock in the process. That's why I targeted PB Head earlier when he had 3 of my claims. That's one of the reasons. And it's why I choose to go after Anti-Pope now.
The black market is online.
From here, the game almost plays itself. I have both nanotech and teleportation. Those are giving me huge advantages. Because while you, for example, has a fair amount of food production set up in the middle of the map there, she still has to wait for shipments to come in from that food. I don't have to wait for shipments. That's a fantastic advantage right now. I get to throw around my money a lot more easily. I always have access to all of my resources. None of them are sitting around the world. I don't have to ship them out anywhere. I don't
We're
have to
not
wait for them to
surprised,
come
just
back.
disappointed in you.
And I'll pretty heavily throw around my market power whenever shortages come up or things of that nature because I have access to all those resources that other people are locked out of.
Offworld shipment launched.
Not too surprising
Look at
that I get
all
down
the
some
money.
electronics
Shipment
production.
launched. Look at all the
As people
money.
try and get more and more off-worlds up, electronics will keep getting more expensive, and if my own get knocked down through dynamite or anything of that nature, having my own electronics will allow me to deal with it far more easily. Once again, this is just me trying to secure my lead, make myself very difficult to buy out because I have a massive lead. I can get away with just throwing money at debt. I don't need to invest it anywhere. I just need to make it impossible for other people to take me down at this phase of the game. I could have considered moving into chemicals. I likely didn't because I was done using chemicals. I didn't want one of those engineering nonsense. I was done with the patent lab. I had the 2 I was really, really cared about. And so I don't believe that ever happened in this game. In addition to that, fuel can be kind of unpredictable, actually.
The black
As people throw
market
down
is
more and more
online.
buildings and get more and more desperate for land, as they get more and more crowded, they'll throw down buildings farther and farther away from themselves and then have to pay more shipping all of that out, especially with the scientific in the game. That can be very true. Steel is proven quite lucrative,
Offworld shipment
like it
launched.
often
Look
is
at
in the
all
late game with all these
Offworld
off-worlds
shipment
flying up,
launched. Look
which
at
is why I
all the
left my
money.
steel production running for quite as long as I did. Water's gotten insane. This, I believe, is a big part of what makes me kind of switch tactics. I've identified that water has gotten ridiculous through this shortage, that either the AI created
Offworld
or
shipment
occurred randomly.
launched. Look
Here I
at
try
all
to
the money.
see if I can build a water pump on a not water tile for the adjacency bonus because iron is worth nothing and water is worth a ridiculous amount. It doesn't work. Just for anybody who hasn't tried that yet. So instead I just mutiny somebody else's water pump. Anyway, I've identified that U has a ridiculous amount of water. Water is ridiculously expensive. And so I'm just, I believe, aiming for her at this point. As you can see, I could be purchasing stock in other people. I don't care. I don't want that. They aren't worth anything in my mind compared to what you would be worth if I could manage to get a hold of all that water production.
Offworld shipment launched. Look at all the money.
Late game, power's
Offworld
ridiculously cheap.
shipment launched.
Throw down a pleasure dome, no
Look at all
surprise.
the money.
Glass has finally tanked as other people have moved solidly into it. So I can get rid of those glass furnaces. I don't know if I ever actually do anything with that last tile. I should. I should figure out some way to use it, but
Offworld shipment launched.
I'm just not that good
Look
at this
at all
game
the
yet, let's
money.
be honest, guys. There's still a lot for everybody to learn. Once again, could have purchased K1. Don't want K1. Don't want to give money to people. I
Black
just want
market
you.
is online.
The interesting thing about somebody who is in a weak stock price position, holding all of their own stock, is it actually turns them into a target. Because if you claim their territory, you know where all that money is going. It's going away. It's just gone. And that's okay. Because it's far better than, say, if I purchased K1 in this position and dumped a bunch of money at Anti-Pope for all of the stocks that he held in K1. Anti-Pope could potentially get a big boost off of that and push to my stock price, even though it's so much higher than his right now. So that's why Yu actually ended up making herself a huge target by having such a low stock price and holding all of it. It worked in the mid-game. It kept her alive, and that was good. Kept her alive long enough to take out Chairman of the Board. Just wasn't quite good enough to push to the end. I still, by the way, look, I understand you're supposed to get your water from water tiles and water pumps, but ice just feels so bad. Ice gathering. In this game, it works out okay because water has gotten, once again, insane. Water has an insane price attached to it right now. But most of the time, it just feels so bad. It's like half the production of a water pump, and it doesn't work at night. Why? Why? It's just, oh man, it's such a bad tile. I don't know. It makes it real hard to use, especially because the last part is it costs glass. And so that makes it real hard to get into. Very, very hard to move into ice collection. Dry ice I find to be far more interesting, given that it gives oxygen and carbon, these two really kind of weird resources where you're like, man, that's an interesting tile. I wonder how I can abuse that. But regular ice, I don't know. It's kind of a boring, just bad tile. Here, obviously, I focus down Anti-Pope with all my money rather than going after K1. That gives me all the stock in K1 I could ever need. At some point, we're going to see probably a control shift down or just some sell on food. And I'm going to finish off the game. That'll do it there. It was an interesting game. Unfortunately, we can't easily go through a controlled examination of the stats screen. But basically what it came down to was a big part of it was that early shift into glass that nobody else could pull off. And another huge part of it was the fact that I shifted away from steel because everybody else had gotten into steel, got down that food quickly. That made a bunch of people gang up on me and target me, which was not fun on any measure. But because they were targeting me and throwing all their resources at me, trying to get food from me, which doesn't work very well with mutinies and such. They weren't getting up their own food production. They weren't investing in their own production. So once the black market wore off, once I finally punched through all of the resources they could throw at me in the black market, I came out on top. PB Head was tanking his debt. And he was the only real threat in the game, let's be honest. He had so much debt, probably from trying to throw so much black market nonsense at me. But it didn't pan out because food was so expensive. That's going to do it for this game. I do have a couple more multiplayer games to go through with the same group of people for the most part. You will see a few new faces, and one of them is a masquerade. So I'll try and point out who I know was who, but I'm not honestly sure for the most part in that game. I only know of one person for sure. So those will be going up soon as well, hopefully. I hope everyone has enjoyed watching, and I'll see you next time.